Well, hello, everybody. Larry Young here again with another segment of Old Man Living Life with Purity. And we've got Alex Beato back in the studio with us. Say hello, Alex.
Good to be with you.
And good to be with you, too. Thanks for coming in. So Alex has been away for a while, and he's been doing some reading while he was on the road. And he had actually had an opportunity to interview the woman who wrote this next book. Her name's Rebecca Roth, and she has a very interesting story to tell. And this story kind of goes against the common narrative that a lot of the world has about the events that happened on 9/11, 2001. And I'm talking, of course, about the planes that were diverted, were hijacked, and then run into buildings. And one was actually grounded into a field in Pennsylvania with all the people on board. No survivors on that one. No survivors on any of these. But the one case that I think he's most dialing in on this one will be the plane that allegedly hit the Pentagon. And it probably has to do with the other Twin Towers ones as well, and even the ones that landed in Pennsylvania. So this is an alternate theory as to what 9/11 was about. No determinations are being made or presented here. It's just brain fodder and something to think about, but there seems to be something that's worth talking about. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex to let him sort of take the stage.
Thank you very much, Larry. What we're looking at is a person by the name of Rebecca Roth, and she initially wanted to write a book about what it was like to be in the airline, and I think she was with them for 30 plus years.
Wasn't she a stewardess?
She was a stewardess, yeah. She was a stewardess, so she was looking at 9/11 through the eyes of a stewardess. And from the author, she writes, she did several books. They're called methodical. It's like 4 or 5 books, Methodical Illusion through Methodical Agenda. And she writes them in terms of the books are presenting fictitious characters, and some of the storyline happens to be fiction, but she weaves in the narrative of the 9/11 issues and incidents into that storyline. And she did this because, of course, she did not want to present this as with names, specific names of people and who they were. She would allude to some of these people in the positions they were in, but the subject matter that she was looking at is very dangerous, and her life could certainly be at risk anytime you challenge the narrative of 9/11. But she says, I never dreamed I would write a book, let alone write a series of books. When I first began to look closely at the 9/11 event, I questioned the official story, but had no replacement theory. She said some specifics of the official story simply did not jive with my professional airline career. I have never been one to question the government or its involvement in nefarious dealings. However, once I researched 9/11 with a genuine desire to find the truth, magical, some might say mystical things began to happen. Upon discovering that several of the accused hijackers were still alive long after they supposedly died on those 4 planes, I met a retired Special Forces soldier who was at the Pentagon that day. Many of us remember the chorus line of men searching for 757 parts on the lawn and questioned what they were looking for, a fuse, a contact lens, certainly not something from a 747. My friend reassured me that no 747 crashed into the Pentagon. He knew because he was there. That chance meeting encouraged me to open both eyes and not stop until I completely understood the historical episode. Methodical Agenda is now the 5th book in a series, so it would be the best read of them all to know the characters. When I wrote the first book, I never dreamed anyone would write it, let alone see it climb into the top 10 Amazon books. However, that book and interview on Coast to Coast brought me so many fellow airline employees, pilots, flight attendants, and others that the books practically wrote themselves. Since the 4th book, Methodical Exposure, I have read through thousands of books and manuals, documents, news articles, magazines, stories to discover who was behind the operation, how they pulled it off, and why. And so this was the last book that she wrote, and she's saying she learned more and more as she was writing these books. She said, I enjoyed nearly 30 years airline career working as both a flight attendant and an international purser. I was trained as an emergency medical technician and served as a volunteer firefighter. My expertise and training as a flight attendant allowed me to research the events of 9/11 with an insider's knowledge that eventually led me to discover details and answers to some of the most haunting questions surrounding that infamous day. I enjoyed a very exciting life, both in the air and on the ground, and because of that, I was encouraged by my co-workers to write a book. As I began to do that, I discovered that 10 of the accused 9/11 hijackers were still alive. Several of them were also airline employees employed with the Saudi Arabia Airlines. They had had their identification stolen before 9/11. At least 4 of the accused hijackers threatened to sue the U.S. government and the FBI if they did not stop using their names and identities. That discovery, along with the U.S. government's refusal to discontinue their false accusation, ignited my curiosity. After thousands of hours of research using official documentation, print, video, media, 9/11, several books, I discovered that there was also 2 women involved in the 9/11 event. Using my personal knowledge of in-flight procedures, FAA hijacking protocols in the state of Massachusetts, and cell phone technology, I discovered yet to be exposed details concerning the planes, the passengers, perpetrators, and all which are woven into methodical illusion. As this book is a result of that extensive research. Based on real-life events, it is written as a novel to protect me and my family from repercussions that inevitably occur when one gets too close to the truth. I am now considered by many to be the foremost expert on the events of 9/11 in 2001, and I invite the reader to contact me with any questions through my website. And she writes her website down. The interesting thing about Rebecca Roth is all the top, many of the top people that are involved in podcasts, where they have millions of Alex Jones and some of the other people, Rogan, and have not covered this lady. And you think they would cover her because she seems to have done the most research on the events of 9/11. And she looks through it through the lens of a person who is an insider and is a airline stewardess. When I interviewed her and I called her, I asked her about, there was one event, she was very sick when she was like 15 or 16, and she alluded to the fact that God intervened, and where she should have died, our Lord had her live. One would perhaps call it a miracle. And then once she began to write about 9/11, she says, I understood why God preserved my life, and it was for me to look through the lens at what happened on 9/11. And so I asked her, why don't you, when you talk about this as a podcast, you can see her interview, you can take a look at her interviews and how she presents what happened at 9/11. And I asked her, why don't you bring that aspect of the spiritual aspect forward? And she kind of sidestepped the question. She didn't want to, articulate it anymore, that she believes she was preserved for that particular reason. And
does she bring up faith in any elements in the books at all? Or is it more about being a real surgical aspect?
Not so much the faith part. It begs the question.
Hope?
Yeah, there's. I think she doesn't really touch on the faith or the hope of it. I think that she presents her research and the people that she says that she met, and tries to validate. Certain things you got to be careful, because she says that CIA operatives called her and said, "You figured it out. You figured out how we did this thing." Mm-hmm. And I think they more did it to tell her, to put her on notice.
Or to stand down.
Stand down, and which, pretty much, she hasn't had a major effect on people's perceptions in terms of 9/11. And I think it stays like that. so probably continue to live. But I think that they would go after you if you begin to mention very high level people that are still living as being a part of this thing, and you think you got it's just a dangerous path. I mean, if they can kill popes and poison popes, they can kill John Kennedy, they can kill anybody.
But those are probably all inside jobs.
Huh?
Those are probably all inside
You would
jobs.
think,
killing
yeah.
a pope.
Yeah.
Well, you look to the cook. Because they were told to put the little capsule in. Now's the time. That's why you can't do an autopsy on a pope.
Why is that, Larry?
Why do you think they want you prying around what they're doing?
Probably not.
It's against Vatican law to have an autopsy on a
Is
pope.
it?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So, after reading her books and interviewing her and seeing her do her presentations on the internet, I think she's probably telling us the clearest aspects of what happened on 9/11. Now, who is behind it in terms of the money? I can speculate maybe for us, but it would simply be speculation. It would not be any. I have no knowledge, of it. But I would say that the aspect of 9/11 probably involves a lot of very high-level people. Certainly, whoever the one world order is, those people that have either masses of money or power, either power that's derived from the dark side, and power that's arrived through money, in position. So, and that's a vague term, isn't it? One world order. I mean, who are these people? I think that overall, I think America was looking for certain people in the higher echelons of America were looking for an event similar to Pearl Harbor, they say, that could catapult us to a major player in the world and to continue to dominate however they wanted to dominate. And so there was probably an American face of very high-level powers that would probably include Air Force generals, Air Force technology at the time, coordination with perhaps a president that was either aware or not aware of what was going on, but probably had enough sense about what was going on, but plausible denial. There was Israeli participation in this event, according to Rebecca. There was, I don't know if there's any Vatican involvement in it. They often refer to the Vatican as having a very powerful group that has worldwide information through, being throughout the world. And it's also considered a sovereign nation within Italy itself. But that there's no sense or any mention of the Vatican in this.
Well, they consider the Vatican to be having tentacles and fingers into things even more so than the CIA does.
Is that right?
Well, because look, if it's the way it's structured,
right, all throughout the world. You
got people all over the world.
Right.
All these guys are collecting information.
Sure.
Whether they know it or not.
Right.
Or confessionals.
Right.
Who knows what gets
said in the confession, right?
Well, what gets said in the confessional, but what gets said upline to superiors in the church.
Right. And they can get it back
as long
to
as it's not going out to the public, I think that gets them around the seal of the confessional.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
I'm just.
Well, it's a power group. It is a power. It's
well,
a power.
information changes hands.
Right.
Right. All throughout this thing, and power comes in all different forms. Right.
So I think the last player would be Muslim, but oligarchs. These are people that would be in very rich. You could say elements at the very highest level of people that are worth trillions of dollars, and the money is within the hands
there's
of.
There's about 3 or 4 different types of Muslim.
Huh?
There's like 4 or 5 different types of Muslim in the world.
Yeah, I think
you got Sikhs, you got Sunnis, you got
right. But we're talking. I mean, they're the
they all don't get along.
Right, but the ones at the very high top with the money,
right,
they get along with the world everything. I think
and I don't know which.
I would
blend
assume
of
right.
Muslims that they are Islam.
Right. Well, the ones that are worth trillions of dollars, so it's not your average. Okay. Well, because this is the club. This
Yeah.
is the club. I mean, it's money and power. So, and it's concentrated. I don't know. I'm projecting these. It's theoretical.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I think there's a certain class of them that do hold all the dollars, primarily more than others. They're all at the top, or
The food chain.
yeah, they're all sitting on cash. You know, they're all like drug lords. I mean, as far as money goes,
Right.
just a different commodity. But I don't know how all that works in the bosom. But power is power, and power is
Corrupt. Absolute power.
corrupts. Right.
Right.
Absolute power corrupts.
So let's just take a look at a few things that Rebecca that she discovered. She discovered that a guy by the name of Silverstein was a private purchaser of the Twin Towers, which I think before that, and you can fact check this, was more of a public. Those buildings were more of a public a domain. It was not an individual owner. So I think a year or 2 years before the Twin Towers, Silverstein purchased that. She talks about art students that were in the Twin Towers prior to 9/11. That were Israeli art students, and they were arrested apparently by the DEA, I believe, that arrested them, and they thought that either they didn't have the right documentation, and I'm not exactly sure why they were arrested, but they were quickly released from there. We know that the security at the Twin Towers were two of the Bush brothers, and they had resigned their position, I don't know, a month or so, 2 months before 9/11.
Well, I got a little something to add to that. So you were asking about the public owning the Twin Towers. So the Twin Towers were owned by the Public Port Authority of New York and New Jersey.
Okay.
Okay, and it was leased to the private company Silverstein Properties for the management and operation just before the September 11th attacks.
Okay.
That would have made sense that the security team would have changed out.
Okay.
Because it was changing over from the Port Authority then to Silverstein Properties. Okay. And so that would make sense as to why there'd be a wholesale change out of authority and security. So that seems like it's on pace with what that said. So it was just before the towers dropped, it was all assigned over to Silverstein Properties.
Yeah, and I think they insured it specifically for if there was any kind of a terrorist attack. I think the insurance guaranteed that if there was terrorism that brought the buildings down.
Because a lot of times terrorism is eliminated from coverage.
But I think they specifically wanted to cover it.
Right. And so you'd have to have a
correct?
certain coverage for it. They signed a 99-year lease 6 weeks before 9/11. The lease was for the right to operate the buildings and not the land. But it doesn't say anything about insurance.
Okay.
But I would think that somebody would be covering for terror because they'd been hit once before.
Right. They tried
They
to blow
tried
them up.
bombing
Yeah.
from the basement.
Right.
So obviously they had.
They had insurance on it. And
If somebody was to give it to them, yeah.
I think the insurance company hedged on wanting to pay them out, but the government said, you got the contract, you got to pay them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were paid off when the buildings went down. I'm not sure
And
how
that
long
killed
it took.
insurance all across the country.
They don't.
Oh my gosh! I went from the insurance I was paying at the property in Rome City.
No kidding.
I mean, 1,000 miles away from any of this.
Yeah.
I mean, very little impact. But I had been paying like $8,000-9,000 a year for insurance. It went to $22,000 a month.
No, you couldn't afford it, could you?
No. But
$22,000 a month.
yeah, insurance jumped
Well, there you have it, folks.
from $8,000 on the year to $22,000 a month.
Yeah.
So I had to go without coverage because it was just like
I
a
hear
risk
you,
and a
God.
take.
There you go, folks. Well, Mr. Silverstein got
It
paid.
affected
Did you feel
everything
better?
nationwide. And that was just dropping 2 buildings.
Okay. It's crazy.
Imagine if San Francisco went down.
You're paying $250,000 for insurance on your buildings. You would have had to pay almost $250,000 a year.
Yeah.
right? For you to insure your buildings.
Right.
Oh, geez. Not to mention the heating.
Well, that was another, $13,000 to $20,000 a month.
It's amazing.
It was an incredible net to cover, but these insurance pools were totally inadequate for the risk that was being covered, and it still is.
So it hasn't
Building
come down.
insurance, there's no way if there's a massive attack that any of these insurance companies are going to be able to pay your claim.
Right.
You see them hedge it like a hurricane or something like that, where they don't show up, they don't pay, they just leave people alone. It goes on, and that's just for wind damage. But that can be pretty extensive when you're across a wide area like that. A lot of money, but there's not enough money. The insurance companies don't have enough to cover their potential losses.
It's crazy. The other thing that was brought up in the books and is the idea of that the Twin Towers came down as a result of a controlled demolition. The societies of architects have all looked at the situation. I think you can certainly Google what the organization of architects are saying regarding the Twin Towers, and that it all looked very much like a controlled demolition. Building 7 also, which was not hit by an airplane that said that it was on fire, that also collapsed in itself, and they said, well, that looks like a controlled demolition. And
So there was more than just the 2 buildings?
Yeah, there was a building 7 that went down, if you look at it, and it wasn't hit by planes.